emotional Facebook experiment?
Yeah, so it was published in 2014, but the research ran in 2012, and it was a study. So it was published in the PN, the Proceedings. Anyway, I can't remember the name of the publication, but it's a very prominent publication. So in the experiment, about 700,000 users were selected without being told, because the user agreement allows one to be, it was in PNAS. The user agreement allows you to be...
the Facebook, like the general user agreement.
Yeah, any general user agreement of that platform, and really any platform, subjects you to A/B testing or experimentation. Mm-hmm. So 689,003 users. Massive scale. So the title's really interesting, and this was the last time that the Facebook research team published in such a prominent journal, and I think it was partly they wanted to announce this. It was a little bit of like planting a flag and showing that they had done something that was historic in the field of operationalizing emotion. So the basic experiment was somewhat simple. They divided these users into 3 groups. The first group was exposed to their news feed was altered. So instead of receiving the regular algorithmically delivered feed, you got a more negative feed. Then that was measured by word counting software that claimed that measures the emotional state. So it was more negative, and those people then were tracked in how they responded. Did they post more negative things? Did they react in a more negative way as measured by software?
So they measured their reaction by their posts.
By their any kind of reaction or emoticon.
And these people had no idea they were part of this experiment.
Right, and that they discovered, and then another group, their feed was altered positively and to a greater or lesser degree or intensity of positivity. And then that group was also traced in its response. And then a third group was a control group, so their feed was unaltered. And the discovery was that the negatively altered group then posted in a statistically significantly more negative way. The positive group was more positive, but less striking.
Right.
And then the control group was unaltered. And so, but what's interesting too is that the article talks about this, that they say they've operationalized emotional contagion. And emotional contagion was kind of a concept that psychologists have been talking about since the 90s, or perhaps it had been defined in the 1990s, but really it goes much longer back. The question of how do you spread emotion? And people have always known, of course, that if you're in a room with somebody, you're having a conversation like we are, you could be spreading. This is like the essence of a mother-child bond or something like that. But the question was, could emotion be spread? Could negative emotion be spread? Could it be done if you're not in the physical presence of someone? Could it be done across vast distances? And could it be done at scale with a massive, that's why they say massive scale. So the article was really kind of triumphantly announcing that, yes, we've proved that this can happen even in the absence of any kind of contact.
Wow, because it's completely not efficient to use actual drugs on people, because you can't affect a population. You can't go give somebody some acid. Every single however many people are on in the country. What is it like 500 million people in the U.S., something like that. But if you can find a way to manipulate what they already have in their hand 24/7, they're staring at, and use something use the tools that are on their phones already to sort of manipulate the chemical balance in their mind. That would be the perfect way to do this.
And what I discovered too was that, so some people wrote into when it became publicized, because it got a lot of attention, this experiment in 2014, although, so some people wrote into Facebook saying, could I ever know if I was in this experiment? Because I became very depressed during that period. I was in the hospital with suicidal ideas, and I want, it was very heartbreaking, and others were outraged. There was an investigation of some of the researchers, but it really came to nothing as far as I can tell, and everyone was essentially promoted. But what I discovered is that some interesting things, there's not necessarily a direct connection, but the word counting software that was used to measure negativity, to measure the emotion in the experiment, was actually trained on people's diaries, because they said we need to be able to measure as if we were able to enter the minds of the subject. The software developers said, who are psychologists, they said, so we'll have people write about the worst thing that's ever happened to them in diaries, and then we'll take that and sort of make it's almost like a preliminary language model.
What?
20 years ago, and they use that. This is just the accounting software itself, but so it struck me, it's almost more symbolic, but interesting that it was trained on the data of trauma, essentially. And I'd also discovered that the definition of emotional contagion also goes back to this kind of classic study that was done at the University of Hawaii about trauma, essentially. So it's not simply just trauma, but really just that you also find this in the earlier cases with cults and with POWs, is that the unresolved emotions, people would say, whatever issues you have, your trauma. And now we understand trauma to be far more pervasive than it used to be seen as. It used to be seen as incredibly rare. Like a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist who was trained in the 60s, he said, you would expect to run across maybe 1 or 2 cases your entire life, and it would have been someone who'd been in a fire and been burned over most of their body. But of course, the definition and our sense of it has changed radically, but I think it gives us some insight into how everyone has something that can be some emotional tug or trigger or whatever it is. So I try to shift the focus a little bit away from ideological battles to the sense that these platforms, and I think concerningly AI companionship, these AI companions really trade on a kind of emotional conduit or contagion between the users.
Yeah. And it's funny how easily people can be swayed online too. Like for example, there's this phenomena on, I don't know how often you read YouTube comments or read through like X or whatever, but there's this phenomenon on YouTube. Specifically, if there is like a decent amount of commenters on a video, right? Let's just say it's like a political video of something that happened in the news during like today. And there's, out of 1,000 comments, the top 50 comments, top 100 comments, all are sort of agreeing about one thing. A new person who comes in and starts to read those comments without even watching the video, they are gonna go along with the consensus and agree with them, and it's not incentivized for somebody to come in and just disagree with everybody.
Yeah.
They want to feel like they're a part of the group. They want to feel like they fit in.
Yeah.
So there's this thing, it's called the pylon effect on YouTube. So like if somebody comes in and says something, everyone starts piling in, and it's not necessarily like their independent thought. They're not using like their critical thinking skills at all. They're just sort of like joining into this group discussion.
Yeah, it's kind of, that's a great example. I've definitely seen that. I'm very interested in
Like and subscribe.